So, welcome to Expert Views on ADR Ever Video Podcast Show, a podcast about simplifying the traditional African method of settling disputes or the appropriate dispute resolution ADR in a bid to attract more users to settle their disputes with mediation, arbitration, collaborative law, negotiation, conciliation, early dispute resolution, restorative justice, adjudication, and of course, early neutral evaluation. So this week I'm sitting with Jon Bui. He is an apology expert. Hi, John, educator,
Hello.
public speaker, and mediator. He is the founder of the Negotiated Apology Project. John teaches conflict resolution using apologies and high-level negotiation strategies. Welcome to the show, John. Let me stop sharing now. It's such an honor to
Thank
have
you.
you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Same here. So without further ado, the first question is, apologies are often dismissed as a soft interpersonal gestures. So from your legal and organizational perspective, what are your thoughts on this view? Thank you.
So, yeah, I think, when people dismiss apologies or when they dismiss it either as a weak gesture or like kind of just overlook it, they're forgetting one very big thing, which is it is a very, very low cost thing to the person who delivers it, right? It doesn't cost you much to just kind of own up to the mistake. So when you're trying to resolve conflict between two people, right, obviously at least one person is in the wrong, or maybe both people are in the wrong and they've done a series of wrong things. And to kind of start the conflict resolution process with that acknowledgement, it's a verbal commitment to like, hey, I want to fix this thing between the two of us. And the first thing I can do is acknowledge, my part in creating this. And it doesn't cost you anything. Like the cost to utilize is very low, but the reward can be very, very high. Because ideally what you want is to have the other person, when you're trying to resolve conflict, you don't want it to be you versus them, right? You want it to be you and them versus the problem. You're working together to solve the problem. So the sooner you can get them on your side, the better. And that's why I think an apology is so powerful, because it could either resolve your problem immediately or it could push you very, very far along the process of solving the problem.
Thank you so very much for that clarification. And I totally agree with you that it doesn't cost you anything to apologize, and when you do that, you have to like sort of commit to the process, which you rightly said, verbal commitment, and then that would aid in resolving conflict when the apology comes through. So when you talk about verbal commitment, sometimes people would sort of, would I say apologize or show remorse, but they wouldn't want to verbalize it. Could that also be considered as an apology if that is not communicated verbally?
Are you saying like if people do not communicate it or they do communicate it?
If they don't.
They don't?
So, but
Yeah,
you could see from their, what was it called? Is it from
the
their
body
face?
language.
Body language, you could see that they're actually remorseful, or but they don't, maybe pride or ego wouldn't let them to verbally communicate. How do you handle that, or is that some sort of apology?
Yes and no. And I say like mostly no. So here's the thing about feeling bad and understanding that you've done something wrong. it's
Yeah.
very important that you communicate that across to the other side.
Mm.
Because when we do wrong, right? When we realize we've done something wrong, and it's great. It's good that you get to that realization, but it's not it's not going to give the other side perspective into that realization that you have unless you communicate it across. Um, in every relationship, communication is key. Whether it's a friendship, professional relationship, a romantic relationship, communication is key. Communicating you feel, communicating what you think, it's
Yeah.
extremely important. And when you're apologizing, it's very much no different. It's just communicating how you feel. It just so happens that, communicating about like what I've done wrong might be a little bit more emotionally difficult for you than communicating
Yeah.
like I want to have this for dinner tonight. But it's important for to acknowledge again your part in this so the other person has the whole piece of
Yeah.
understanding of like where your headspace is at and how you really feel with the problem. Because
Mm-hmm.
from my perspective, when you're apologizing to someone, you're really giving them this, you could call it a gift, you could call it a show of goodwill, you could call it some sort of consideration, some sort of value. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason why you verbalize it or you show it in some form of communication is because
Mm-hmm.
you are giving them this so that they understand that you approach the conflict resolution space in good faith. And so for you
Mm.
to show it on your face, it's if they were like very magnanimous, right? If they were like
Mm.
very considerate, they might
Yeah.
accept that. But most of the time, when someone does me wrong, I want to know from them, like, hey, where's your headspace at? How do you think about this? Like, if you're
Yeah.
sorry, like, tell me, like, kind of
How you're
where,
sorry.
yeah, like how you're sorry. And I don't think that makes me or anyone in that position like selfish. It's just important to have that bridge of communication. So yes, if I was like very, very aware of the other person, sure, I might be able to accept it. But for the most part, I always advise people overdo it. If you feel like if you feel like, oh, I'm showing my face, I'm showing my body,
Mm-hmm.
well, tell the other person why you're acting or feeling or you looking like the way that you do.
Mm. So essentially you have to communicate.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to communicate.
All right. Thank you so very much for that clarification. So in legal culture, yeah, apology is frequently conflated with admission. So how do you
Mm.
distinguish between moral accountability and legal liability? Okay.
I'm very glad that you came back to this. Because yes, conventional wisdom in the law, um, they do say like, don't apologize, don't apologize. It's an admission of
Yeah.
guilt. Um,
Yeah.
and I in the legal code as it is written right now in the US,
Yeah.
and mostly where I am in Arizona in the US, yeah, it doesn't agree with what I'm doing. But again, when you think about it in terms of practicality, right, the cost is very low
Mm.
and the risk is also very low as well. When you attack a legal case, you could attack it on liability, you could attack it on causation, you could attack it on damages. Um, and I find that even if you apologize and they poke at it like, hey, that's an admission of guilt right there. Um, it doesn't necessarily always mean that like it is a winning legal argument, right? It
Mm.
might be one more headache for your lawyer to take care of. But for the most part, I find that it's kind of easy for lawyers to just kind of like hand wave is like, well, the two people were in like a high stress situation, right? Like after a car crash or like maybe some sort of like traumatic person-to-person experience. My client was, in a traumatic experience, and they want to give comfort to the other person. So as far as an apology being an admission of guilt, you could certainly attack it that way, but I find that it is also pretty easy to kind of defend it. I personally do not like that the law allows people to take apologies as admissions of guilt, because most people aren't like me. They're not a trained legal professional. During times of great crisis, we tend to try to be better, kinder people, right? So maybe saying some words of comfort, words of apology to bring everyone back to a place of center, I think that should be rewarded, not penalized. Again, I find that, when an apology is being attacked, it is also very, very defensible.
Oh, thank you so very much. Because you could find out in some places when people apologize, they sort of weaponize it. They sort of, maybe they sort of record you and say, oh, well, I mean, their intention was never to resolve conflict. Their intention was just to get evidence to, further persecute or attack the person, or, so is there any law protecting people that apologize or who tend to apologize? Is there any apology law in place that would protect organizations or individuals who express remorse?
Yes, there is actually, and it's from my point of view, it's kind of a half-baked law, meaning that it could be a lot stronger. So, Phoenix, Arizona, there's a lot of retirees that live here, and so because a lot of retirees, a lot of medical professionals. There is a medical apology law here, which limits what could be taken as liability if a medical professional were to apologize in a certain capacity in a certain way. So oftentimes it doesn't cover, if someone were to make like a full apology with a full explanation, it gets very, very dicey as far as to how much medical malpractice liability that law would actually protect. But there is a medical apology law here on the books. And it's not particularly, again, in my opinion, it's not particularly comprehensive. A lot of apology laws that exist in the US, in the various states here, it allows up to certain levels of partial apologies. So it doesn't allow in-depth conversations, which is unfortunate, right? Because oftentimes what really drives people to pursue legal action is that they don't feel like they are being heard or being seen. There's actually a survey out that shows that 46% of people who sued or are thinking of suing for medical malpractice, they would not have brought the suit if they received a full apology. Now, the key word there is being a full apology, because you need to also explain, like, okay, what went wrong and so on and so forth. But oftentimes, medical practitioners are so liability adverse that they just simply clamp down, don't have zero communication, and they're like, I'll let the insurance take care of this, I'll let the lawyers take care of this. And so it's really difficult to get that full apology out of them. And the fact that the law here only protects you up to a certain point, I feel like it, instead of encouraging medical professionals to try to apologize, it dissuades them from trying to, because they understand that at any point during the conversation, they can overstep from what is protected to liability. So I think like a half-baked law, it's not good enough. It has to be stronger.
So thank you so very much. So what happens? Like you are a lawyer and an apology expert. could you say that if you have such issue or conflict, do you first of all draft an agreement like sort of for before you going into a mediation, that whatever is said here, like a confidentiality agreement, if you apologize, that would be used against you? Is there sort of something you do or you would sort of do in future, to make sure that people that apologized would be protected?
Yes, I think so when I do mediations or when I, coach people on how to make these apologies, or when I sit in the middle, I
Yeah.
do often try to enforce that whatever is said here is said for the purpose of conflict resolution, and that, we're not going to, as much as possible, not try to use this ammunition, to attack the other side later at court, especially when it comes to, admissions of like wrongdoing. And I try to frame it as like, this is my opinion of what happened, right? Because when you're apologizing to someone, you're saying like, okay, here's what happened and here's why I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to tell someone like, here's what happened, it's kind of, it's your opinion on the matter, right? So stay with me here. If I'll use a very, very simple version. Boy and girl, and let's say the boy is cheating on the girl, right?
Yeah.
And the girl finds out.
Yeah.
There's his side, there's her side, and then there's the truth, right? So when the guy's apologizing, ideally what he should be saying is like, okay, this is what happened. This is where I met her. This is what we've been doing. This is how long we've been doing it, and so on and so forth. The facts, as far as he knows, is only from his own perspective. And the facts that she knows only from her perspective. And then there's what actually happened. And so what I try to enforce is, when we're apologizing and we're trying to create that goodwill, good faith in negotiation, we are only reciting our opinion of the facts and not the facts themselves. So we don't want to have those opinions be a barrier to good faith. We want to protect the open conversation and our opinions about what went wrong so that we can work on solving it rather than use as an opportunity to try to attack the other side later on. So that's how I kind of rationalize those agreements whenever I'm like mediating.
Oh, thank you so very much, John.
Yeah.
I sort of want to ask a question about, apart from the laws in Arizona, is there any other law, is there any other states that the apology law exists?
Yes, so the medical malpractice apology law exists in a few states. I know in Canada they have like a pretty large blanket apology law because the stereotype is Canadians apologize all the time. And again, ideally I would like to see the laws here become more expansive. So medical malpractice is a pretty big field where they focus these apology laws on. I would like to see it expand to like more general insurance matters, right? The big thing you hear is if you get into a car accident, don't say sorry.
Injury cases, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's foolish because car accidents are extremely, extremely high stress situations, and you shouldn't expect the average person, to suddenly turn on your lawyer brain in those situations. I think we should be able to comfort each other without penalty in those times. But they do exist here. A lot of them are, again, they protect you up to a certain point, which again, I find doesn't help people engage with these conversations, it just makes them not want to do it because, again, they are afraid of like, well, what's covered and what's not under this law.
Okay, thank you so very much. So that's medical apology law. Okay, so it's also in Canada. All right, thank you so very much. So what happens to workplace culture? When leaders sort of avoid apology after harm has occurred.
Yeah, the relationship between leadership and the everyday line level employee is always, I would say tenuous, but it's an ongoing dynamic relationship. I often tell, leaders, managers, whether they're high level managers or middle level managers, if things are going well for you guys, if the relationship is good, it can change anytime. And like any situation can cause it to change, right? Imagine you have like a pretty good, stable relationship, and then you fire someone, who's been there for a very long time and everyone loves them, without like a good reason. All of a sudden that there's gonna be mistrust. Let's say that there was a case of harassment and management does nothing. All of a sudden there's mistrust. Let's say that the CEO got caught having an affair with the chief of HR. Suddenly there's mistrust. So any action, any time could cause that relationship to suddenly come into question. So that's factor number one. Factor number two, there's a survey out that shows that 95% of regular workers, believe that the tone of the culture is set from up top. So however the top talks, acts, and the way they carry themselves, the 95% of workers believe that is representative of what the culture or the vibe or the energy of the company is. So if the leader is like very bombastic, lies a lot, and so on and so forth, the workers are basically saying like, well, if they can act like that, I can act like that, right? But if the leader is honorable, accountable, is able to have good, strong, difficult conversations, then the workers are going to believe that too. Now, the way that survey is phrased, right? 95% of American workers believe that the tone is set from up top. Doesn't necessarily mean that the tone is actually set from up top. It's what they believe. It's what they perceive. So belief has a power of its own, right? So if it doesn't matter whether or not there's a directive from my boss telling me like, I need you to be honorable and to be communicative. It's merely, I believe that if they are honorable and they're communicative, then I shall do the same because I want to emulate what I believe the culture to be. So it's very, very important for leaders to always check themselves. And I find that a lot of the people I work with here, they do check themselves. They do hold themselves to a higher standard. But I can also just, off the top of my head, think of like a dozen Fortune 500 CEOs where I'm like, oh my God, why are you acting or like talking that way? My example is always the former head of BP, Tony Hayward, just with the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, just the worst example of leadership, accountability in history. There will be case studies on how disastrous that PR went for decades. But yeah, to answer your question, very important that leadership not only walk the walk, not only talk the talk, but they also walk the walk as well.
Oh, thank you so very much, John. So from what you say now, what is your view or what do you consider as an authentic, or what are the elements of an authentic apology in the workplace?
Yeah, so there are certain elements that I have which are going to be very common sense. And then now, so that would be, like understanding what the problem is, acknowledging your role in the problem, a display of empathy, of understanding of the pain it caused to the other person. So those are some very important elements of an apology, and restitutions. What actions are you going to take to help resolve this issue? Now, in a personal relationship, you would kind of like create these restitutions yourself, right? Like if I accidentally shoved you or struck you out of anger and I know I have these anger problems, one of the restitutions I might put on the table is like, I'll go to anger management classes, I'll go to therapy, because it's important for me. I'm apologizing for shoving you. Maybe you broke your arm. I help pay for the medical bills. But if the underlying issue is my anger, it doesn't matter if I pay for it now. The risk of me doing something to you in anger again is still there unless I address that. So that's a direct correlation between what I am willing to do to fix it and how I will protect you from this same damage in the future. So restitutions are very important. Now, one element of the restitutions that a lot of I don't like phrasing it this way, but I would say like non-lawyer minded people fail to approach apologies in is evidence creation. The common way that you see on Facebook, on Instagram a lot is an apology without change behavior or an apology without action. It's just empty words. You hear this all the time. Yeah. And so from a lawyer perspective, I'm like, I need you all to understand that phrase, an apology without change behavior or action, it's just empty words. It's another way of saying you need to create evidence that you've changed, right? And this is where restitutions come in and why it's so important. A second ago, I was telling you that it's important for CEOs and business leaders to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. In your individual capacity, whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship, it's the same thing. It's important that you don't just talk the talk, you also walk the walk. So if I make promises about restitutions A, B, and C, I'm making these promises of actions I will take, it is important that you actually take those actions. If I promise you I'll take anger management classes or I will take the trainings that HR mandates that I do, but if I don't do it, right, then I'm failing to walk the walk. Every time I go to anger management class, every time I go to a therapy class, whatever it is I go to, whatever I promise you, every single time I go to one of those, I'm creating a little bit of evidence that I am willing to do what it takes to pay back, the issue between you and I. Every time I don't do it, I also create a trail of evidence to show that I don't care. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
very much.
When I do what I promise, that is an apology with change behavior. And that is not simply me talking. But if I do not do it, if I do not follow up, I'm not creating that trail of evidence. And I am simply talking without change behavior. And from a legal perspective, the more evidence you have, the better, right? Because you will always be weighing the good evidence versus the bad evidence. The bad evidence is whatever I did to you. In the workplace, if I was a bully, if I was harassing you, whatever happened. And that will always weigh against my character. But the good stuff that I do, the remedial actions, the therapy, the training, that can weigh against the bad evidence. If I don't do any of the good stuff, the bad evidence will always weigh very heavy against me. Like, let's say, oh, I only go to a few classes. I don't go to enough classes. I keep missing them. I don't change. Here's my good evidence. It's super light. It doesn't
Yeah.
help weigh against the heaviness of the bad evidence.
Yeah.
But the more I do what I promise to do, the more the other side will see, like, hey, like, he's very dedicated to changing.
Mm.
And that's how people start to forgive you. You have to work on it over time and commit to the actions.
So what you're saying essentially is that apologies come with changed behavior, and those changed behavior would be by way of evidence, and the good and the bad. The good would be your promises you've made, and then you're keeping it. The person is keeping it, and of course, the bad evidence could be, not keeping those promises he or she made at the period of the apology. Okay, thank you so very much. So, what happens where in workplace conflict? Yeah, there is always this thing about power imbalance. So, does it affect the credibility of apology?
Workplace power imbalances, like, say, like a leader to a subordinate.
Yes, supervisor-employee relationship. Yeah.
I'd say yes. I definitely say yes, because if let's say it starts with a manager, right? If a manager does something wrong and they apologize to an employee, that's huge. It humanizes the manager. It shows that the manager is not beyond reproach. It shows that the manager is just another person who makes mistakes. And it's fine. You'd be surprised how forgiving people can be when you own up to your issues. It can go a very long way. It seemed like, oh my God, like the vice president, like apologized to me. You can leverage that title. You can leverage, that relationship into like activating the other person's, like loyalty, I guess is a way to say it, loyalty or forgiveness. But the opposite can also be true as well. If a manager, just doubles down, they never apologize. They're like, no, you're wrong. I'm the boss. Like, I don't have to say, I'm never wrong. It can, just as it could doubly positively impact the relationship, it could doubly negatively impact the relationship if you leverage your title, your position to go the opposite direction. And of course, how you as the employee, right? Let's use the inverse now. The employee apologizing to the manager. How that happens is also extremely important as well. If you were put in a position where an employee felt like they were forced to apologize, or scolded like a child, obviously it wouldn't feel too good for them, right? It would. You're putting it in a position where it's almost going to be like, well, I'm saying this because I have to say it, and no one feels good when they're in that position. So that's why the answer to your question is very complicated, but that's why it's important for organizations to create a safe place for these conversations to happen, where judgment will be withheld and where people are freely able to express their feelings in these situations where wrongful actions are taking place, because it's very, very hard for people to talk about these things when about their wrongful actions, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to have these conversations if they don't feel like it's a safe place to do so. I think titles definitely throw a huge wrench into that dynamic. The short answer to your question is It depends on the culture of the company. Does the company create a safe environment for these conversations to occur? And if they don't, the question is why not? Because if there's no safe space for these conversations to take place, then it doesn't really matter what the titles are or what the dynamic is in the workplace. It's not going to be good for anyone, manager to employee, employee to manager, employee to employee, managers to other managers. It all starts with the setting.
I think we've got a few minutes to go, so I would want you to answer this question. It's very important. So, if you're called to advise an organization or an institution tomorrow, so what structural steps would you recommend to embed apology into a sustainable, accountability culture?
I think it starts with providing training, and everyone needs to be trained to play a role, to be supportive of these conversations. I believe the African proverb is "it takes a village," right? It takes a village, and everyone has their own role. When training's important, because in my couple of years of doing this, I have found the biggest reason why apologies fail is not because people have these conversations and they go wrong. I find that apologies fail because people don't have the conversations at all. And the reason why people don't have the conversations at all, I've deduced down to 1 or 3 reasons. The first reason is they don't know where to start. They don't know where to start these conversations. The second is they don't have confidence in themselves to actually go through the process. And the third reason is they're scared of the outcome of the conversation. So any one of those 3 reasons, right? Not knowing where to start, not having confidence in themselves to do it, and being fearful of the outcome. Any one of those 3 reasons will keep a person from starting a conversation at all. It's important for organizations to help, and this is like an emotional thing. It's an emotional issue with a lot of people. Companies ideally should train their folks to help them overcome these emotional mental hurdles so that the conversations can happen. The important thing is having the communication occur. It's better